At the dinner table, my father's words landed like a silent blow. Your sister was born to live soft. You're the one who pays for that. If you don't like it, the door is right there. No yelling, no anger, just that cold, steady voice that cuts deeper than any shout. I froze, my mother's hand hovering over her glass, Harper chewing like none of it mattered. And me? I smiled. Not because I agreed, but because I finally understood the role I was meant to play. I didn't argue. Instead, I cleaned my plate quietly, folding my napkin with a calm that felt foreign. Then I guess you'll handle the bills, I said lightly, watching their forced laughs fall flat. What they didn't know was that the dinner they'd just enjoyed had already cost them everything. People asked me what broke me that night, expecting some sharp moment, a crack that shattered everything at once. But it wasn't like that. The fractures had been forming quietly for years beneath the surface of our family life. That dinner was just the light finally catching on them. Growing up, our family ran a small bookstore in the heart of our town, a place full of dusty shelves, dog-eared pages, and quiet afternoons. To outsiders, it seemed cozy and charming. But behind the counter, the reality was different. My father, a man who ruled the shop like a king, expected perfection from me. The practical one, the reliable one. My mother tried to keep things balanced, but the scales always tipped in favor of Harper, my sister, who floated through life untouched, wrapped in softness and praise. I was the one who stayed late, balancing accounts, managing orders, fixing the shelves Harper knocked over with her clumsy grace. She was the artist, the dreamer, and I was the anchor, the backbone no one noticed. When I won a small writing contest, at school my father barely glanced at my certificate before asking me to help Harper organize her art supplies. Harper's finger painting was framed and sold at the store counter. My achievements were efficient and practical, but never celebrated. By the time I was in high school, I was managing the cash register, organizing events for Harper's art shows, and paying the bills that kept the store afloat. Harper skipped shifts to chase her dreams. When her shows failed, it was artistic risk. When the store finally turned a profit one summer, my dad called it luck. College was a chance to escape. I earned a scholarship, graduated with honors, and started working as a curator at a local gallery. My name appeared in articles, my parents bragged to anyone who would listen, and I felt like I was finally carving out my own place. But the pride didn't last long. The moment I set boundaries, started saying no to unpaid family debts, the respect vanished. Thanksgiving was a ritual, a moment to pretend we were a family. The night before, I drove to their old house. The same cracked walls, the same creaky floors, but the air felt heavier, smaller. Harper lounged on the couch wearing designer clothes. I could only dream of flashing a new bracelet from one of her collabs. I smiled politely and congratulated her. Dinner was tense, polite. Then my father's voice cut through the hum. Your sister's doing so well. She was born for this softness. You, on the other hand, were made for the grind. His knife tapped the table. If you don't like it, there's the door. No one spoke. Harper smirked. My mother averted her eyes. I sat there, my hands folded, realizing that this wasn't a family welcoming me, but a cage I'd outgrown. I left that night without a word, the silence inside the car more peaceful than any music. Back at my apartment, I faced my boyfriend Mason. I told him everything, the sting of their words, the bitterness behind the smiles. I expected anger, tears, but none came, just a cold clarity. I was done funding their favoritism. Over the next weeks, I quietly cut off the money. The mortgage payment stopped, supplier bills went unpaid. The store that had been my family's pride began to crumble. Calls came, demands, desperation. But I stayed silent. One night, standing alone in my gallery, I stared at a cracked mirror. Installation, shards reflecting broken fragments of light. Finally, I understood. Families break. Pieces can be glued back, but the cracks never disappear. The phone rang again. My father's voice was tight. Fix this, Kate, my mother begged. Harper demanded. But I didn't answer. I wasn't their crutch anymore. I drove past the store. The window displays faded. Harper's prints yellowed in the sun. Inside, my parents looked like strangers drowning in their own failures. I felt no pity, only relief. Weeks later, my aunt called. There's been an audit. They're blaming you for missing taxes. I was listed as a guarantor, a name used without my knowledge. The final insult. I sent one last email. Clear, cold, and final. I was severing all ties. No explanations, no apologies. When my father showed up at my door, pleading and desperate, I laughed quietly. You're right, I said. I finally paid in full. They lost the store, the house, the life they thought was theirs to command. Harper found a job cutting glass in a frame shop. My parents worked odd jobs to survive. And I was free. Freedom tasted bitter and sweet, but it was mine. The morning after I sent that final email, the apartment felt different, lighter, almost empty. The weight I had been carrying for years suddenly lifted, but it left a strange hollow behind. I sat by the window, sipping my coffee, watching the city wake up beneath the soft glow of dawn. The streets buzzed with life, but I was detached, like I was watching someone else's world unfold. Mason's text popped up. Are you okay? I didn't reply right away. How do you explain this kind of freedom? It wasn't relief or happiness, not exactly. It was more like stepping off a cliff and realizing you don't know if you'll fly or fall. I'd spent so long building my life around their expectations, keeping the family business afloat, paying off their mistakes, supporting Harper's dreams when mine were quietly pushed aside. Now, without that invisible tether, I felt both free and utterly untethered. I decided to go for a walk, to clear my head. The city was full of people rushing to work, chatting over coffee, living their ordinary lives. And here I was, a curator with a freshly minted reputation, but no family to celebrate it with. It was a strange kind of loneliness. At the gallery, Clara greeted me with a nervous smile. Kate, the winter exhibit's opening is next week. Are you ready? She always called me by my full name when she was stressed. I smiled, but inside, I was still processing everything. I'm ready, I said, though I wasn't sure what that really meant anymore. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work, organizing the exhibit, selecting pieces that reflected my own journey, fractured glass sculptures, paintings of broken roads, installations that played with light and shadow. This wasn't just art, it was my story, carefully curated for the world to see, but the silence from my family was deafening. No calls, no emails. Just the occasional message from Harper's account, cryptic, angry, and bitter. You think you're better than us? Family doesn't just walk away. I deleted each one without a second thought. One afternoon, a surprise visitor came to the gallery. An older woman, dressed simply, with kind eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 stories. You must be Kate, she said, extending her hand. I'm Ms. Whitman. I knew your grandmother. I blinked. My grandmother had passed years ago. I hadn't thought about her in a long time. Your grandmother was a fierce woman, Ms. Whitman said. She ran this town's library for decades. She believed in stories, the power they have to heal, to break chains, to set us free. I nodded, unsure where this was going. Your family has history here, Kate, not the one they want you to believe. The one rooted in strength, resilience, and love beyond what you've been told. She handed me a small, worn notebook. She kept diaries. If you want, you can have them. That night, I pored over the yellowed pages. My grandmother's voice filled the room, her struggles, her triumphs, her fierce protectiveness of family, even when it hurt her. I realized my story wasn't the first to be tangled in secrets and silence. It gave me perspective. The past didn't have to dictate my future. I could rewrite the narrative on my own terms. A week later, the opening night arrived. The gallery buzzed with anticipation, but I kept my distance, watching from behind the scenes. People admired the pieces, some whispering about the emotional depth. The fractured mirror sculpture caught every eye, reflecting faces fragmented but beautiful. Mason found me just before the speeches. You look different, he said softly. Like you belong here. I smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. Maybe I do. Then unexpectedly, the gallery doors swung open. My parents and Harper stepped inside. My heart clenched, but I stayed calm. They looked lost, out of place amidst the crowd of artists and collectors. Dad's eyes scanned the room, landing on me. Kate, can we talk? I shook my head gently. This is my space. Not a courtroom, Mom's voice wavered. We're sorry, Kate. We didn't know how to say it. How to ask for help without breaking you. Harper looked at me, tears threatening to fall. I miss my sister. For a moment, the silence was thick with everything left unsaid. I thought of the years spent pretending everything was fine, of the money I'd given, the forgiveness I'd offered silently. I took a deep breath. I'm not the person you needed me to be, but I am the person I've chosen to be. I gestured to the mirror sculpture. This is what happens when something breaks. You can try to glue it back, but it's never the same. And that's okay. Some cracks are meant to be scars, not wounds. They looked at me, truly looked, perhaps seeing me for the first time. I'm done being the fix. I'm done covering the cracks that aren't mine to heal. With that, I turned back to my guests, letting the evening carry on. The applause at the end of the night wasn't for them, it was for me. For the woman who finally reclaimed her story. Weeks later, life settled into a new rhythm. My parents sold the store and moved to a smaller town. Harper took a job at a local design firm, finally learning discipline in her own way. I stayed in the city, diving deeper into my career, curating exhibitions that told stories of strength and survival. Mason stood by me through it all, his quiet support a steady anchor. One morning, I received a letter and no return address containing only a simple note. Growth is painful but necessary. May we all find our way to the light? I smiled, knowing that some doors closed to let better ones open. And as I looked out my studio window at the rising sun, I finally felt ready to step through whatever came next.